Fewer filmmakers develop a style that's so intrinsically them, so intrinsically unique, that their name rings beyond the realm of cinema to permeate art and everything surrounding it. David Lynch is a name that carries an aura with it. To mention that something is akin to David Lynch will evoke a strong image and atmosphere in the mind of the person hearing it. But as blatant as something is in evoking a Lynchian feeling, we still don't know exactly what is Lynchian. A sinister looking room is Lynchian. An old piece of music is Lynchian. A person smiling is Lynchian. Odds are when we speak of Lynch, we arrive at many different ideas, all of which fit the mould of Lynch. For Lynch is a filmmaker that deals in the uncanny, in the most mysterious parts of our very being that perhaps still remain a mystery to us.
Welcome to the Cinema Cartography.
This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/cinemacartography. That's mubi.com/cinemacartography for a whole month of great cinema for free. Lynch is an auteur of the greatest sense, and has approached varying forms of art to discuss a unique perspective of cinema. His work rings true in ways that many pieces are incapable of, reaching through deep subconscious layers and pulling out something we've never seen before, finding the places where our darkest fears and the complete unexpected often reside. There may be no better introduction to the work of David Lynch beyond his debut feature film Eraserhead. Released in 1977 and shot over the span of several years, Eraserhead may exemplify better than any of his other works Lynch at his most Lynchian. Self-described as his most spiritual film, it also appears to be his most personal, both in content and context. The film evokes deep internal messages and imagery, and to have complete control over this, Lynch worked as director, writer, producer, editor, and sound designer for the entire project. Eraserhead was a story that Lynch wanted to tell, and manifested a method in which only he could tell the story in this manner, a style that truthfully was unlike most films up until that point. Eraserhead gained a cult popularity due to its circulation at midnight screenings, but would push the awareness and appreciation for surrealist cinema further than anything that had come before it. Something that will become a running theme when examining his work is often the futility at describing what a David Lynch film is about. Eraserhead is no exception, yet despite being his most surreal piece of work, there's a salient narrative thread that runs through Eraserhead, which serves as an anchor for the story, and was one of the things which perhaps makes it more accessible than other art films. The film follows Henry and his complications of what may or may not be his child. However, beyond this, the film operates on a solely internal level, sculpting a logic and rationale that's unique to this universe, the themes of which will fully explain the journey that Henry will embark on, all the while remaining unexplainable. Analysing any shot or sequence within Eraserhead must not be looked at with absolute logic. Eraserhead has its own internal science of reasoning, and when watching the film, that same logic must be applied if we're to gain any understanding of it. We'll elaborate on this more throughout, as it's a method which is entwined within the work of Lynch, but if we want to find greater meaning in his creations, then we must look within our own subconscious. The opening shot of the film shows Henry superimposed over a mysterious planet. The opening shot implies that there are two planes simultaneously occurring within the film, Both Henry and wherever this mystery planet resides both exist. The when and where is irrelevant. The fact that they are is all that matters. A common theme for Lynch is duality. There are always often two planes of reality or two parallel truths to something. Not only is there a present alternate world, but an unconscious dreamlike one. And it's not only just something that's alluded to, it's physically represented for the subconscious dormant horror it actually is. This is something that differentiates much of Lynch's work beyond the surreal. His dreamlike elements, and that which would often be perceived as the immaterial that are present in Eraserhead, lack distinction between what we would call the material and real world. Here we're able to drift from one reality to another, all existing within a single paradigm of equivalence. Lynch's approach in Eraserhead is something that he would return to time and time again. However, it's possibly at its most evident and glaring here. It's best to avoid describing the world of Eraserhead as post-apocalyptic, because that insinuates that it not only is a world that operates on a realistic logic, but also exists within our own reality. Rather, the physical environment of Eraserhead should be viewed as some part of Henry's reality, not one that he fully inhabits, but rather a permeable border that he passes in and out of. Our world is linear. In Eraserhead, the world is its own spatial vessel. The world is industrial. The harsh black and white is representative of this universe's intensity. The black tones in this film are complete blackness, absolute voids of anything, sometimes suggesting that the world entire ends at the boundaries created at the lack of light. Henry traversing into them is just as likely to emerge on the other side in another completely different realm. The buildings are concrete, oppressive monoliths. Large pipes and metallic structures jut out of the world. The idea of mechanization infests the film. Everywhere we look, there's some machine-like object crunching away within the space of our characters. The outside world appears as an industrial park that appears to be never-ending. And the claustrophobia of the literal unnatural are the building blocks of the characters' lives. Outside the windows are brick walls. Large radiators are brutally positioned in the room. The first character that we see beyond Henry is the burnt, disfigured man, pulling some kind of industrial crank which activates a sperm-like creature. This direction that Eraserhead takes its world allows us to view the disturbing fusion of the mechanical with the organic. Anything natural appears to have been vaporized from the world of Eraserhead. However, there's something alive about this overt mechanization. The machines seem to breathe with the spitting fumes they exert. Strange moss and plants are often seen growing from places. Henry himself has bowls of water in his drawers. The artificial world is the only thing that seems to evolve and grow. The world of Eraserhead appears to serve as some kind of primordial soup that's brewing and creating a new form of life. This fusion, whose influence can be seen in works such as Shinya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo, the Iron Man, is a crux of a theme within Eraserhead that secures the film's narrative throughout all of its surrealist turns, and that is the fear within Henry, the fear of the growth of that which controls him. For what's more uncanny than something unliving that appears to suffer like a human? Henry is positioned as a victim within Eraserhead, perhaps not as we would assume a person to be victimized, but within the rationality of the world, he should be recognized as a person out of control. Henry's passivity is a demonstration of his incapacity to do anything about the endless nightmare he finds himself in. Many times we see Henry, he's often paralysed as everything around him collapses. The preeminent theme in Eraserhead is fear. Fear coming from within the character that we will inevitably feel, and the crux of this nightmare is about overwhelming emotion. Everything in Eraserhead overwhelms, from the overbearing settings to the harsh industrial soundscapes. Soundscapes are a unique facet of Lynch's cinema, often each needing to be examined on their own merits. But in Eraserhead, it's evident that the soundscape indicates something inescapable for Henry. The abrasive high-pitched scratching and scraping to the guttural blasts of industrial noises create an auditory panorama that completely encapsulates the world. The sounds are often so powerful that they can't be escaped from. For Henry, this is just one instance of his position as someone who can't control their surroundings. The overwhelming nature of sound is but one hue of the palette in Eraserhead. The other key to how the surreal nature of the world becomes abrasive towards Henry is how the strangeness of the world is never mentioned towards him.
Sure as hell don't! Look at my knee! Look at my knee!
For Henry seems to have one foot in our world and has a sense of alienation within his own. His expression is often that of an other, one that doesn't quite belong, confused and trapped in a world of ambiguous logic. The essence of the nightmare, again, is the overwhelming expression experienced within Henry. The film seems to become more and more confined until it becomes emotionally staggering. The climax of the film reaches its zenith, in which Henry is literally trapped in a room as the world closes in on him. Sometimes these emotions are dual in nature, like the father aggressively smiling while behind the daughter weeps. The fact moments like this are receptive within our own logic and passed over within the films leaves us in a helpless situation, unsure of what even the right response is in a situation like this. The fear instilled within us of the uncanny is the same crushing emotional state that grows within Henry. There are multiple instances in Eraserhead wherein we can actively make connotations between a scene's content and interpret it as it could occur in our own reality, like the discomfort that emerges on Henry's questioning by his in-laws.
Henry, I asked you if you and Mary had sexual intercourse.
Well, I don't think that's any of your business.
Henry!
We can view this film as is. However, it's always good to remember not to apply too much logic to the film, otherwise we'll be looking at it through a myopic lens. The surrealism of Eraserhead is a deeply internal one. When peculiar things occur, Lynch is extrapolating an idea beyond our earthly realm. He aims to take our subconscious to match the motive of the film. Hence, as the film escalates to its frightful climax, the use of familiar psychoanalytical imagery arrives. Not for the sake of using established imagery that already exists, it comes deep and honestly from within Lynch himself. It's here that we can see Eraserhead as a meditative experience on our part. We have to find the source within us that makes this film more recognisable. The idea of Henry being watched, having his hand forced at being dragged around, being helpless. Notions that are instantly recognisable by us, even if the means in which we get there is through the uncanny valley. The world is almost familiar, but it remains at just enough of a distance that we treat everything as threatening. The emotion this conjures up, that Eraserhead carries through the entirety of the film, is all we truly need to know about the piece. Lynch, who is known other than his art for his work in transcendental meditation, aims to reach the other that dwells within, where our shadows, our secrets, our fears lie, perhaps even unaware by us. This film converses with us solely in that territory. The fear of becoming other through your circumstances that Henry endures is the same experience as us watching the film. The terror that arises when you're unable to do anything about where you are would be the same dread as losing control of your own organic being.
Mommy's got a nosebleed.
The film's finale operates with the duality that exists within Henry that establishes much of the film's thematics. Potent sexual imagery litter Eraserhead, and it's perhaps the area of the film that has the most conscious level of filmmaking. Henry, tormented by his offspring, seeks solace elsewhere, aiming to escape the horror of his own life for any kind of serenity. If we were to look at Henry's fears, we could say that perhaps it comes with a lack of commitment to anything. The simple fact that he seems to have one foot in two worlds strongly suggests that any kind of acceptance of duty taken on by Henry would immediately nullify the events of Eraserhead. For instance, Henry immediately distances himself from the pregnancy and begins to creep closer and closer towards infanticide, the burden of the child becoming overwhelming. We often see him acting out some sort of genophobia, yet simultaneously he fantasizes about finding tranquility in other women, but he seems to fall for the false promise of removing his own personal responsibility, told that everything will be fine. I see the duality in Lynch being a self-reflective message, that the only way to bypass the everyday dread of life and the often awful situations that can manifest around us is to better comprehend oneself. Henry is victimized primarily because he exists outside of his own subconscious, endlessly tormented by how unstable it's become. Eraserhead, as horrifying as it may be, can grant us solace in the awareness of this knowledge so that we don't fall into the same fate. The filmmaking of Eraserhead is quintessential Lynch. When examining blocking, lighting, sound, we often discover that there's something very salient about the techniques. Lynch here offers an original perspective in how to elicit meaning through a genuine dream logic, or perhaps it's better viewed as a nightmare logic. As such, the perspective of the camera is made to be just that. It goes against traditional filmmaking techniques because they're meant to ingratiate us within a world. Here, the filmmaking is meant to isolate us, increasing what feels like the hostility of the world. Wide shots frame things as unreal, like literally how we would see things in our nightmares. And in the film's finale, the movement of the child, the direct look from the severed heads, and the incredibly tight frames act as the crescendo of a piece that continues to ramp up the pressure within Henry until he physically could no longer stand it. The film ends with a deafening cut to silence, followed by jaunty music. The final duality Lynch demonstrates is that though two things can be seemingly opposite to one another, on some plane, they're one in the same. Often the reason why Lynch has always been unafraid at incorporating humour within his work. As it doesn't distract from the strangeness he aims to evoke. Alienation, the other, fear, lust, shadows, all of these take place in Eraserhead. And although looking at her work, it's always important to discuss its content and deeper impressions, with most of Lynch's work, but particularly this one, it's often best to experience it individually. Even though the themes stand out and can be pinpointed to an emotional location, each experience of Eraserhead should be uniquely your own. It's a triumph to see that something as bold as Eraserhead could have become the template for all of Lynch's work to come. And although it may be his most idiosyncratic piece, this was just one manner in which Lynch could create cinema that strikes us at our innermost core.